Welcome to Aired Out, brought to you by Capitol Showplace Montpelier and Paramount Theater Barrie. At FGBtheaters.com, CW Print and Design in Barrie, at CWPrintDesign.com, Peak Entertainment, PeakDJ.com, Cruise Planners, your land and cruise experts. In Vermont, CruisePlanners.com, Donnybrook Fight Promotions of Williamstown, CBDCrave.com. Presented by CVTV, Public Access Channel 192 and 194, CVTV723.org, Fontaine, Forestry, and Millworks, Route 14 East Montpelier. Custom orders, rough, kiln dry, plain, tongue and groove, or shiplap. FontaineMillworks.com and Fly on the Wall Productions. Now, let's get aired out. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'm JD Green. You've got Aired Out. It is an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thanks to Fontaine, Forestry, and Millworks in East Montpelier. Custom orders, rough cut, planed, tongue and groove, and shiplap. They do it all. The kiln dried, you name it. We love them over there. Mark Fontaine and the rest of the family. And, of course, Tony Campos and Central Vermont Television, CVTV, where we are. For Aired Out. Most Vermonters know by now the Fish and Wildlife Department has proposed changes to Vermont hunting regulations. And with us to discuss the overhaul of the state's deer hunting rules, the Director of Fish and Wildlife, Mark Scott, and Vermont Game Warden, Mark Schiestel. Am I saying that? Did I get it?
Yeah, you
Touchdown.
Did.
Yes.
We only rehearsed it 7 or 8 times.
Yeah, we did. Now, is that German? What is that?
Yeah, at one time it was Schichtel, I'm sure.
Yeah. And you've heard Schichtel a few times, I imagine, from me anyway.
Most of the times when I hear it first, people trying to pronounce it, they get a cuss word in there.
I'm sure.
And sometimes even after they know me, the more you know me, the more likely it is that there'll be a cuss word in it.
I am so glad that you both are here. I'm going to start out by reading the wire, the AP wire that came over not too long ago. What was this? March 11th. The Vermont Fish and Wildlife Board going to be considering changes to the state's deer hunting regulations that would allow first-time adult hunters to participate in a youth hunting season proposed for late October. Other highlights of the changes that were presented to the board last month include continuing buck age management through regional antler point restrictions and an annual limit of 1 legal buck. And when I read this story on the air, I instantly thought, of course, of, well, actually both of you. That's why I reached out to both of you. But Mark Scott, Director of Wildlife, I'm going to lead off by saying, first of all, this is super casual. So
thank you. Good.
So
I like it that way.
You can loosen the tie on this one. But I want to ask you, how much heat are you getting?
Oh, I can't wait to hear this.
Woo, yeah, turn around. I want to see this too. How much heat are you getting?
Glare at him.
From Vermonters? I mean, first off, I mean, come on, Vermonters generally are not crazy about change.
You got that's the one point. But
even if it's
I only got a chuckle because we got Warden Schiestel here, and I love my job. I don't always get the heat until I'm at a public hearing. These guys get it every day.
Do they?
They got about 160,000 customers out there that might have a fishing rod or a gun in here.
Yeah.
And what I've learned when you come to Vermont for newcomers, I've been here my whole life, is you want to start a conversation with anybody, whether they're a hunter or not. Mention the 4-letter word deer, and that's EER for folks. Maybe when you're a little younger, you want EAR, but that gets people going. They're passionate about deer, whether they hunt them, whether they want to see them, or whether all of a sudden the money they invested in their shrubs and landscaping is down the tubes in one night.
What a point. What a great point.
Or if you're trying to grow agricultural crops. Or now, today, we're seeing that if you're a forester, trying to grow some commercial timber in the state.
Sure.
Good luck growing some yellow birch, ash, sugar maple, if you've got a problem with too many deer on the land.
Wow.
But I got to say, our frontline ambassadors for us, and we're lucky to have in the state of Vermont, is the 35 field wardens. And Mark is one of them that's here today.
Oh, shucks.
He's
Don't let me stop you.
That's okay. And I didn't get paid to do that. I will say, before you turn it over to the pro here on that, is one of the great aspects of my job is getting to work with these folks on a daily basis. And today, we would not have their successful wildlife management programs. And I got to say, I think they really are from surveys we do with the public. If it wasn't for our wildlife biologists being able to work with our game wardens, they really are full force wildlife conservation people out there working on the forefront to protect our wildlife in the state. And we can't thank them enough. They get a lot of data for us too that we use as biologists. So
you just got a raise, brother.
He deserves one.
Yeah. That's usually how our raises come, in the form of just praise.
Yeah.
It's nothing actually in the paycheck.
So how much? So is everything your fault?
Yes. Yes.
Everything is
although the department does shoulder a great deal of responsibility in this regard. And one thing I want to make sure, when people see a game warden on TV or getting gas or somebody from the Fish and Wildlife Department, they mistakenly think that we do our work solely for the benefit of people who hunt, fish, and trap. And I did want to get right here at the beginning and to hit on something that Mark said here. We manage these deer because all of our lives are enriched by the presence of these animals on the landscape. Yes, sometimes when we have a good, healthy deer herd, they do come in conflict with motor vehicles on the roadway or agricultural practices, but it is really a natural resource that is owned by everyone in the state. So everyone has a say in how these animals are managed and how the herds
whether
are
you're
managed.
a hunter or not.
Correct.
Absolutely.
They belong to all of us and not just those people who buy hunting licenses. So we try to keep in mind that we're doing this for everyone and not just for those folks who pursue them during the open seasons.
It's a great comment that Mark made, and to pick up on that, we hold these department holds a lot of hearings all over the state.
Yeah.
Deer is always a big topic, and I say we probably average 12 to 15, depending more in this time of year on deer than other subjects. But we get some general landowners coming to these things.
These are the forums you're talking about.
Yeah, well, they're actual technically hearings. We got certain obligations by state legislature, our Fish and Wildlife Regulatory Board. It's got 14 members, one from each county that we work with on setting these. But I also say, recognizing what Mark just said, is this year we spend a fair bit amount of money every 5 years or so trying to get a pulse on what are the hunters thinking, what do they want in the state of Vermont, what are their interests, because they're a key tool for management, and we've got to keep some hunter satisfaction high. But this past year, we also spend as much money surveying the general public, if there's such a thing out there. But we randomly surveyed 600 Vermonters, whether they hunted or not. Some of them hunted, to get an issue on how do they feel about deer, how many do they want out there, and things that Mark hit it about. Everybody loves to see a deer or a moose in the state of Vermont till one ends up on your windshield, or the same way in your backyard. So we're trying to balance all these interests that people have, and we should. We work for the people in the state of Vermont. Granted, hunters pay the bulk of our salaries, but general fund money's been kicking in recent years, and that's a big help to us.
Wow. Sure, and I feel obligated to say something nice about Mark, and it's taken me a while to think of something. After you said something so nice about game wardens, but when people think of the Fish and Wildlife Department, and again, something that he said, we are sort of the face of it. So people think of Fish and Wildlife Department, they think game wardens, badges and guns, but it's really just a small part of what the Fish and Wildlife Department and the Agency of Natural Resources does for everyone. Certainly the most engaged of our constituency are the people who hunt, fish, and trap. Right? They're going to want to know what their chances are when they buy a license, what their opportunities to harvest an animal might be, and so they look to the department to protect that sort of thing. But a lot of work goes into habitat management and helping private landowners manage their land for the benefit of the wildlife. And this is done not just for the landowner or the people who pursue game animals, but for all the animals, game birds, lizards. I mean, the whole gamut. Our Fish and Wildlife Department, I don't know that the general public is aware of how much we do. And if you're thinking about game wardens, you probably see a green truck driving around, and you may mistakenly think that Fish and Wildlife Department is a law enforcement agency. It's not. It's a certain segment of our department, but the rest, and certainly the vast majority of people employed by the Fish and Wildlife Department spend their time not thinking about laws and regulations, but thinking about the conservation of this natural resource and how we can keep it continuing.
But yet you can issue a ticket and you carry a gun.
That is something we can do. Yes, some of us. Yeah.
Right. Mark, Come on, man. You didn't really totally answer my question. How much heat are you getting about these new regulations?
Here's the bottom line, and maybe if people view this more, I'll get a little more heat, which is, I hope so, because it shows me they're passionate, they're interested. This proposal that we put together, and I got to say, this proposal started about 5 years ago, and actually it's been in the works for a long time. We are getting relatively little heat over it. I think what we're trying to do is, our best interest is providing the interest in hunting. We're trying to work hard to meet the goals that hunters want in the state of Vermont. Right now, our satisfaction for deer management in the state of Vermont has been higher than it's ever been. It's 77%, and I'll take that on any issue as a public agency in this state. I think it's a combination of things, but are we getting some heat? We are. But overall, this has surprised me. I really didn't, and I'm not sure it may end up this way, but right now, people are overall accepting the idea. We tend to hear from the people who are not happy when we do proposals. We're hearing from some, i.e., where we decide we want to restrict people to $1. That's going to have some big impacts if you're a bow hunter, because then you've got to make that decision when you're out there in your bow stand in October. Do you take that buck, and potentially if it's a legal antler buck in Vermont, or do you let it go? If you take it, the ramifications are then you're not going to be hunting in the 16-day firearm rifle season. That's for bucks only. That's a big decision. A lot of states have these $1 limits, but we also have made the regulations. If you're a bow hunter, we're going to give you a lot of opportunities to shoot an antlerless deer, or a doe, as most people refer to.
From October 1 to December 15?
That's the length of, I'm glad you brought that, the length of the new proposal for archery hunting. So if you are a bow hunter, the days are awful good in Vermont right now. And we need you. We need those tools where they can get in the areas perhaps that people aren't quite receptive to somebody using a firearm, the urban areas, the suburban areas. We find our bow hunters, it's a patience game. So they're going to select their hunting sites where there's a lot of deer. They're not going to put it on top of a mountain or a deep woods, because the odds of them seeing a deer are probably pretty low. So those are some of the trade-offs. Do we want to do that? No, we don't want to do that. But if you're a hunter out there with a bow, you get to make that decision, whether you want to shoot perhaps that 4-pointer that walks in front of you, or decide, I'm not going to shoot it. I'm going to try to take a doe because I want to be in deer camp with my family and my friends in November 16th. Still doesn't mean if they decide to shoot that 4-pointer that they still can't be in deer camp. But they better not be out there chasing a deer, or the guy to my left here is going to be after them.
So, can I jump in? Because I don't want to be the host here. But,
no.
I do want to talk to
guys.
Mark.
I told you guys. I want you to jump in.
That's right.
What we're talking about here are proposed rule changes, right?
That's correct.
So
Good idea.
If I'm going to have to, if I'm going to ask you to handicap, what is the likelihood of this stuff passing in the same form as it was submitted?
Right now my readout is really strong. If I'm a betting person, I'd put that bottle of beer on the table if there's a bet. Or
just one bottle of beer?
Well, look at my age now. I'm happily married and trying to pay off for 3 kids still in college. They're getting through
he
college.
He drinks the 40 ounces.
Yeah,
one bottle.
It's not the 1970s when I'd take on anyone, but that's just because of my makeup. But anyways, Marshall, I think it's a really good chance. But here's where we are. The board has passed the first rule. The first vote on this rule. So they're going to do a second vote in the third Wednesday of June. We've got 2 more public hearings on that. We've got all of May, all of the good part of June for people to send us public comments on it. The key that's unique about this proposal is we're taking a stance. The board has been with us, and we only got to this point with the board by having a lot of meetings, all-day training sessions on this, so they really understood the biology of the deer, the dynamics of us having less hunters in the state of Vermont, the influence of somebody using a crossbow, what's that's going to mean, all this stuff. So this wasn't just done in a night or two with the board meeting. So we're selling it as a recipe. I like to think of stew. If you're going to make stew, you need some meat, you want potatoes and carrots. That's usually your standard stew. Whether you want to add some onions, celery, or peppers, whatever else you want to put for seasoning, those are additional things. So we're feeling that there are some key core things to the recipe. One is if you're going to have all this increased bow hunting opportunity, we feel that in fairness of all the other hunters out there in Vermont, you got to stick with $1 total. That's it. If you're going to have an early muzzleloader season, antler season, that's part of the core ingredient. So we feel those things got to stick together. Whether we decide to allow people to use a crossbow or to have this novice season, first-time hunters, that's kind of an extra ingredient that we think will help deer hunting in the future of Vermont. So that's where we are. Now, if the whole thing goes south, I don't think we have anything to lose in the state of Vermont, to be honest with you. We got high hunter satisfaction right now. What we have to lose Overall, though, is biological concern on health of deer. We're starting to see trends that deer are not as healthy as they should be in the state of Vermont. We're seeing less body weights. The antler beam diameter on the young bucks that we have a lot of data on is starting to go down. We're seeing high numbers of deer in urban areas that people are quite concerned. So we need some tools to deal with that. And the other reality is, I'm a native Vermont. I grew up in Vermont. I grew up in a family that you don't shoot doe. My father was dead set against those days. I think are over. But what we're seeing from our data, it's really interesting, is I'm saying less than 30% of our deer hunters right now are willing to shoot a doe. That's got to change because we need to have hunters shoot more doe in some places, and we can regulate that. So that's a little bit of an eye opener on us on some recent studies that we've done.
Yeah, people who pursue these animals are. I'm just going to guess here, but I think I'm on safe ground if I say they're our number one herd management tool.
You got it. That's for
right?
sure.
We manipulate the type of deer that can be taken, where they can be taken. The people who pursue these animals are the number one tool that we can employ to manipulate. So if we see something wrong with the deer herd, we look at what the hunters can do for us. One of the most interesting things I've found out about the proposed changes is in some of those areas where villages, say, have an ordinance against shooting a firearm.
Right.
We have difficulty managing the deer herd in those areas.
South Burlington?
South Burlington's even bigger because in Burlington's got an ordinance against discharging a bow. So, but the minute we get these tools, as Mark says, that's going to help us working with concerned citizens to put pressure on Burlington folks, the powers to be in that city, to say, look, we've got a deer problem. We need you to welcome hunters into your city in order to use them with the bow. Now, will it all be a cakewalk? No. We've had a lot of meetings with Montpelier, quite concerned about the deer, and I have to chuckle. It's just this winter, while going to the State House, 50 yards from the State House, I saw deer tracks, and I had to chuckle. I saw the cedar hedgerow because I'm trying to maintain one in my backyard in South Barrie. Now I got to put a fence around it. I said, whoa, they're going to lose that in a heartbeat. And sure enough, I went by 2 days later, and they had a big burlap around the cedars.
Did they?
I mean, that's what you deal with when you deal with too many animals. And Mark's got it right on. Modern regulated legal hunting, the way we have it today, is our best tool. Our challenge is to get hunters to hunt and to make sure that we're fair to give everybody an opportunity to chase deer in the state of Vermont.
I saw Nick Fortin had written in the VT Digger to better target deer population management by region and age. And how do you know where the older deer are hanging out?
Well, we collect the biological data. I wish I knew when it comes when I take my gun out in the woods and go after them. But Vermont's kind of fortunate, and I relish that. We're a small state, but we're able to have a good history of collecting data. We're probably the envy of most states in the country.
Really?
You have to legally report a deer when you shoot it in Vermont in the different seasons. I know there's pressure for people as to walk away from that, but that's thanks to our law enforcement people. People pretty much follow that. What we learned over time is if you want to break the laws, high probability these folks will catch you because you like to talk and brag about shooting the deer. Yeah. So a lot of the cases are made that way. But by reporting the deer, and then we voluntarily went out to hunters these last couple of years, goes, send us the teeth of the bucks that you shot. Because we were looking at data. And
I remember that.
Our earlier data was based on youth hunting. And then all of a sudden I used to push the biologist, wait a minute. I got taking kids out, and a lot of us have. They're not hunting the same woods that adult hunters are. So we all of a sudden discovered that they were collecting different biological information from the youth hunters that shooting deer and our rifle hunters during the November 16th. So we got tremendous great response from hunters sending in our deer teeth. Wow. So that's how we're able to determine how many 3.5-year-old deer are out there, 2.5-year-old, 4.5. But I got to look at the other thing too. It's probably one of the best services we've ever done for hunters because the minute they shoot a deer, they can't wait to hear from us. How old was my deer?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, and game wardens are taking those samples not just during the hunting seasons.
Yeah, that's important.
So we end up roadkill deer or deer that die in any number of ways. Mm-hmm. We will, during this time of the year, for instance, we're checking to see how good a job the bucks did at getting the does pregnant. So when we have a doe that's dead, we do a fetus check, and in years past we've measured those fetuses to figure out how long and exactly, well, not exactly, but around about when they were inseminated in the first place. So are the bucks doing their job, and which deer are producing young, and all that stuff is not all of it, but the age of the deer can be determined by looking at the root of one of the central incisors down below. It's I don't know if anybody's interested in it, but I found it fascinating.
It is fascinating
when I first came here. So you take the tooth out, and you got to get the whole root and everything. And what the scientists do is they kind of shave off the bottom of the root, and they can count the rings, like rings on a tree.
Yeah, sure.
And that's how they'll age the deer. We've been doing that for moose for, I think, probably as long as we've had a moose season.
Yeah. Well, the data we need.
But the data we're gathering for the deer herd, that is part of it. Is aging those deer by looking at their teeth.
So we got a large sample on our deer. Moose made it mandatory that the hunters all had to turn that in.
Yeah.
Just recently we did it on bear.
Yeah, bear hunters griped a little bit about having
they did it first, and you know, we try to be reasonable. What's amazing is this past year we got 92% of all the teeth collected from legally harvested bear that we. To me, that's incredible. I mean, from a biologist standpoint, we were dreaming of hoping to get about 90%. And there's going to be some real reasons why we don't get a tooth from hunter, even though it's mandatory. You know, they may have put it on the shelf. The spouse may have grabbed that tooth and put it somewhere else in the envelope, or they dropped it out. You know, mail gets lost. Or we rely on our check-in stations that I talked about beyond the wardens checking in deer. So, you drop this information off, the hunter may, and there's a high probability that the tooth being there may not end up in our hands, even though it's in an envelope addressed to us. So there's reasons. But to think we got 92% success rate on bears. Super.
And we're getting that information, too, and not during the hunting seasons.
Exactly.
This time of year, that information is critical. We've got bears getting into everything. They come out of the den hungry, and some of them are taken in defensive property. They get into chicken coops, and there are some conditions under which you can protect your livestock, say from a bear. And if that happens, you can guarantee that a game warden is going to be there taking a tooth so that they get that biological data too.
So what's
even
the deal?
during the non-hunting
if it gets
seasons.
into any of your livestock, you're allowed to take it?
No, that's that.
Well, let's air it out.
There are some conditions that we have to cover a variety of situations. So if you have livestock or some property that's being threatened by a bear, call your local game warden so that they can come out and determine, under what conditions you're allowed to protect your property from a bear. A bear knocking down a bird feeder, categorically no, you cannot shoot that bear.
You got to get a new bird feeder.
You got to you got to take the bird feeder away.
Or change the seat.
Not put any more out for 30 days before we could even start talking about whether or not the bear is a problem. What we have in Vermont, we have a lot of bears that have a human problem currently. So what we do with our garbage, look, the songbirds are going to be fine.
Sure.
If they miss a couple weeks out of your bird feed, they're going to be fine. But you're making...
They're tough little burgers, too, aren't they?
Well,
they really are.
The reason this is fresh in my mind is I had already gone to bed last night, and somebody stopped at my house. They just came and knocked on my door. My wife was asleep in front of the TV, and she got up, and this person wanted to complain that a bear was getting into her dumpster. And so you talk about...
Wow.
Game wardens being most folks in the areas we patrol know where we live, and so they'll stop and knock on the door to tell us stuff at 9:30 at night. My wife less than thrilled about that particular aspect of warden work, but
it happens.
But
I got to tell you that's we guard that so vigilantly. Is the way our wardens work today. This department, we're unique in law enforcement. Anywhere, because they're community law enforcement, and as Mark said, the best wardens we ever had are the ones who get involved with community events. The community knows them. They're their eyes and ears for these people.
Sure.
And I got to tell you, there's lots of bills in legislature, people thinking we got to do things this way or that way. I got to tell you, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I'm so guarded. I said, we're a little bit different than that state over there. We got 35 people who handle this work. I'd rather have a nuisance wildlife call be handled with someone like Mark, who's trained, has the knowledge, and passionately cares about wildlife versus just an enforcement person. So there's been pushes saying, it'll help our budget if we put them in with state police or only enforcement. These folks are not. It probably might be scary sometimes what percentage of the time is not strictly law enforcement. Fortunately, they make enough really good big cases that we can promote that. But that's different and unique in Vermont. And who's paying for it? Hunters, anglers, and trappers. And general fund is kicking in lately. And they ought to be proud of that these folks are out there protecting all wildlife.
So what is a typical day for a game warden?
Boy, how long you got? I tell you,
Not
when
enough.
I came to this job late in life. I did other things before I became a game warden, and I asked myself that question when I thought about whether or not this was a line of work I wanted to do. And I went on a very long. It was risky for me to change careers to become a game warden, and so I called and spoke to game wardens all across the country. I did as many ride-alongs as I could, and it's interesting because I asked that question. I asked, "What do you like the best about your job, and what is it you do?" And to a man and woman, not a single conservation officer or game warden was able to give a short answer to that question. Right? It was just here in Vermont, and we're not a large state, but just depending on where you are assigned in the state, what game wardens on Lake Champlain are doing when they wake up tomorrow is dramatically different from what I'm doing over here on the Connecticut River. Right? And those folks way up in the Northeast Kingdom are different. Their job is different than it is in the southern part of the state. It changes depending on what time of year it is. About the time I get tired of being on the boat all summer and checking anglers and bait fish and stuff, then the fall's coming. Now I'm marching around through the woods and looking for tree stands and bait piles, and about the time I get sick of that, it comes snowmobile season and trapping, and it's never the same.
Wow.
I think most jobs you'll have a plan A or a plan B when you go to work. I've got to have a plan E and F. And even then, I'll give you an example. I had a ride along on Saturday. Somebody who was doing a job shadow for a school requirement, and Saturday happened to be the opener of our youth turkey weekend. So I anticipated that I would be dealing with youth turkey hunters and their supervising hunters all day. So I got up on Saturday. I was ready to go. I had whatever I needed to patrol for youth turkey violations and safety, and I ended up spending half of that day chasing a bear cub around on the interstate. Climbing up on ledges, going after this thing. And it was, later on in the afternoon, we finally got around to doing something that had to do with youth turkey hunting. But, yeah, I didn't anticipate that I'd be chasing a bear around all day.
Very
and
unpredictable.
I did. Yeah, it is.
Did you get the bear?
No. Did not get that bear.
Wow.
Yeah, we thought it might have been a malnourished yearling being mistaken for a cub, because that happens sometimes this time of year.
Interesting.
In which case we can scoop them up and try to get them to a rehabber that'll get them healthy and turn back into the wild. This one was an actual bear cub, and of all things, somebody had seen it on the interstate up in a tree, and somebody came by and put food out for it.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's been seen repeatedly, and I think it's been seen repeatedly because it has been coming back for the food that was set out for it.
Sure.
On the interstate, of all places. Don't feed the bears.
Yes.
And don't feed them right next to the interstate. This bear, if it makes it, it'll be a miracle.
Wow. Isn't that something? Mark, back to the proposals here.
Sure.
But I guess dumb question here, and I'm not a hunter, but although I've often thought about it, if I could find the time.
Well, we're working on that.
do
We're
it.
getting a season for you to
Man, which is nice to know that you have that for novice hunters. But so, kind of a dumb question here. But if there's a smaller percentage of hunters over the last couple of decades in Vermont, then why would we limit one buck?
Sure, because that's a great
to control
question,
the
'cause,
population.
Roughly looking is that's the primary interest of anybody going deer hunting. And I shouldn't say it's not everybody, but it's a driving force that they want to be able to shoot a buck. So if we want to maintain hunter interest out there, we need to manage for some of their interests that they have. Now, there are some people that be just as happy as shooting a 60-pound deer and eating the meat. It's probably the best eating deer you'd ever have. But traditionally, folks here, the majority that we hear from in our surveys and come to us want to be able to shoot a buck. They'd rather that buck be a little bit older. Biological, it's good to have some older age bucks on the landscape than all young bucks doing the breeding. So that's a real key point there.
But in other areas where were advocating for taking doe.
Absolutely, doe. So that's one buck will the little biology on it will mate with several does, and their courtship period is very short. Might be the doe is only going to be receptive to being bred for probably 48 hours.
Wow.
If they're not bred the first time, you got to wait another month for the buck to have that doe become in the heat again, as you would call it, and then another month later for 2 days. So one buck conceivably could mate 9-10 does in an area. So given that we probably have 20,000 bucks or more in the whole state of Vermont, and roughly maybe half of those are going to be harvested by hunters to do out there. So, and we've got probably 70,000 Vermont hunters, maybe 10,000 non-resident hunters on the landscape. So we're trying to spread out that buck harvest potentially of 8, 9, 10,000 bucks that a hunter could take to that 80,000 people. So it's a fairness game to do that.
Now, will the 1 buck limit apply to the Barry Montpelier
Can I
area?
interject here, Mark?
Absolutely, jump right in.
If I've got this wrong, please correct me.
Yeah.
But
Well, I may
of
get-
those hunters who harvest multiple bucks,
Yeah.
I think it's got to be around 5 or certainly less than 10%
It's
of the
actually-
bucks that get taken are second bucks.
Yeah, it's actually smaller than that. The figures are actually under 300 who shoot a second buck from hunters out there. So you take that in the big scheme of things. So Mark's actually right. It is small, but the whole reality is you double that we think will happen by people making a choice. We've seen that happen just recently when we changed our archery hunting regulations, where the total bag limit was 2 deer. It used to be 3. We saw actually people be more selective when they only know they could take 2 deer to do that. So the reason we went this route is we're going to protect about 500 bucks, on the landscape. Well, that's significant when you're only dealing with maybe 20,000 total in the state of Vermont over time. It'll get some more of those older age deer out there. Now, given too, and you're right, Mark, the numbers are smaller, but if we increase the number of days and more opportunity for people to archery hunt, their probabilities are going to take more bucks. It's just a matter of fact to do that. And we're also liberalizing how they can take bucks. We're making crossbows legal for everyone. We know the success rate of somebody using a crossbow versus what they call a traditional vertical bow is higher. So we're kind of quite concerned that the minute we do all these different regulations is the last thing we want to do is hurt the overall quality experience for people buck hunting right now in the state of Vermont. So we don't want to go there because we know hunter satisfaction is high. We want to maintain that to do that. So all these things that we're proposing interact with each other. So we're kind of going what I'd say maybe is the Vermont tradition, a little conservative in how we do these regulations. We have the ability very easily to put the brakes on the number of deer that are shot in this state by the way we issue antlerless permits for muzzleloader season. Right now it's only muzzleloader, but the reality is by the time my grandkids grow up, I don't think hunter numbers are going to change. We may want to have the flexibility of allowing people to harvest antlerless deer with other methods, shotguns or maybe firearms. The reason we don't do it today is we know there's no appetite for Vermont hunters or legislature in allowing us to have antlerless deer shot with a modern-day firearm. We've been there before. We've had our authority taken away by Vermont legislature trying to manage deer numbers. So that to me is what's so fascinating about deer management. It's as much social management as it is, and it's also economic management. It's our bread and butter engine for our license sales.
Sure.
And we need hunters, as Mark mentioned, to do this. So we're trying to maintain that strong interest. At the same time, be quite concerned biologically is we've got a few issues popping up here. So so that's what we're trying to do.
So about 130,000 whitetail deer right now is what you're estimating.
That's what's probably on the landscape. Yeah, we're close to that. Now, by thinking about that 130,000, let's take off 20 to 30,000 that are males at the most. So potentially 100,000 does right now that potentially running out there. Maybe a little less. We know we lost some deer this winter. But think about every healthy adult doe that's out there today in Vermont that's 2 or 3 years old minimum has a good chance of producing twins if they're in healthy condition. So add the numbers up. We know coyotes have gotten some deer this winter. We know, as Mark mentioned, cars are going to kill some deer, but we've got no problem with too few deer. Some areas we would like to see more deer. We just don't have the habitat. We don't have the land conditions to support them.
What's the area that's a little maybe
Well,
overpopulated right now?
Well, most of the state, to be honest with you, except central Vermont region, right here as we speak today. We had a really hard winter this year. So we're limiting the number of permits, doe permits in those areas to increase the herd. Southeastern Vermont, southwestern Vermont is really hurting for too many deer in the landscape. The body conditions, the measurements that Mark talked about we take on the deer telling us that. And the northwestern part of the state.
Question for
northeastern part is not there at all, but we have tough winters up there.
Yeah, of
fewer
course.
Deer.
Question for both of you, and Mark, we'll have you answer first. But what do you say to the Vermonter that you meet who shows, as I have heard, I've got a number of friends that I've heard this from. Oh man, I've been sitting out there day after day after day, and I didn't even see a deer. I don't even know why I bother getting my hunting license. This state doesn't know what the hell they're doing, and the population this is ridiculous. I don't know why I bother having a hunting license.
I've never heard such a thing, JD. Actually, can you imagine? Can you imagine the guy who has a great? Mark, has your phone ever rang with somebody saying, "I got to tell you guys, you're just doing a great job"? Because I passed on
too often.
I passed on. Those folks for whom their deer season is going well, we typically don't hear from them. But
yes, right.
I to that person. Unless they are hunting a particular piece of property, their own property, for instance, and they don't have the ability to move around and hunt other people's or expand their area, I say food plot to those folks.
Sure, track the deer.
Food plots are legal, and if you are limited to one particular spot, and that's the only place you can hunt. Now,
what's a food plot?
A food plot is crops or food for the deer that are planted and left standing.
Okay, like blueberry bushes, stuff like that.
Well, they sell stuff
Yeah.
that you can that's specifically for the deer that you can plant. Rows of corn that you leave standing.
Okay.
What are other popular?
Well, the clover and
clover.
a lot of deer will eat all kinds of different herbaceous material, but green material.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people plant winter beets so the deer have something to eat later in the year when they become.
I had a
available.
guy just ask me yesterday if planting a food plot was considered baiting in Vermont.
Sure,
It is not.
And we get that pressure. People think it is, but at least what we're looking at is they're willing to work with the land. And what the key factor that where Vermont has changed so much in recent times, we have very little what we call young forest. Mm-hmm. We've lost our small family farms in this areas. The farms that have voted to more of these organic crops, well, they not produce in areas where they want deer because the deer is going to be eating the crops they're trying to make a living. So they're smaller areas. We just don't have a lot of young forest, and we don't have the cutting going on to create that young. The deer is an animal, the young forest. It's got to eat herbs and greens and new buds from trees.
Also, a lot of these food plot plants that you would put to help the deer, you may harvest a single deer off your food plot, right? But you'll have 8 deer that are benefiting from what you've done.
Interesting.
So food plots, if you're limited, if you're not limited and you can go anywhere, I say go pattern the deer. Go out on on a lot of the WMUs that we have. That we have huge tracts of land set aside for the benefit of the wildlife. Those I think are something that, although not unique to Vermont, certainly to any other place I've ever lived, they're plots of land that are specifically managed for the benefit of wildlife, and they're open to the hunting. So go on the
wildlife management areas. That's
wildlife management areas, and pattern deer. Look for hookings, look for scrapes, and just expand your search a little bit to those hunters who aren't finding success. But those who are limited to a certain plot of land, improve that land with a food plot. And it'll increase your success.
What's really changed in Vermont that I've noticed, and I get the benefit of being a kid growing up here hunting, is we really can't tell hunters, the deer are way back in the woods. I got to say, if I want to go see deer, I'm not going to go way back in the woods. I think if you want to really look for maybe older deer, you're going to see very few. Yeah, go back there where nobody hunts. That's why the deer got older. They're not being hunted, or get on the mountain tops where they've got more cover. You might find some. But it's really changed. If you want to see deer when you're hunting, do what Mark says. Get out in different places. Look for cuttings. Look for on the edge of forest. Look for the food that's going to attract them, and try to get permission. And most of that, a lot of that is on some private land. So you got to knock on some doors. You got to be willing to move. But what we find, and I'm a victim of it myself, my father was, is we like to go back to the same area we used to go, back and back. Fishermen do the same thing. It's usually a good reason, but once the food dries up, the habitat changes, the deer are not going to be there.
Sure.
That's just the matter of fact. So you got to be adaptable.
Yeah, and I do want to say something about the proposed rule change to deer management. A lot of it is designed so that we can selectively manage harvests based on what region of the state they're in, and even within certain towns or counties.
There's a whole lot of isolation in the language of this, isn't there?
There is, and
Big time.
And so that's a tool to help manage the herd. But getting back to your point about hunters' perception, so if I'm hunting the same piece of land that I've hunted forever, right? And back in the 90s, you couldn't throw up a stick without it landing on a buck on this land. And now I don't see anything. Boy, the state of Vermont is doing a really poor job of deer herd management. Well, they're looking. It's like looking at the world through a toilet paper tube. That is not a representative. Just what's happening on that 100-acre parcel isn't really indicative of what's going on with the deer herd throughout the state. So one of the things that's built into the proposed rule changes is this flexibility for us to manage regions of the state differently.
Sure. And how are you going to get through South Burlington?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be in all the urban areas. Montpelier, we've actually the last couple of years, I've had 2 public meetings by people asking me to come to their evening meeting in someone's backyard. I was actually really surprised. I went the first time I went, I had 12 people there. None of them knew anything about hunting. None of them hunted. They were really quite concerned. They had just too many deer in their backyard. They couldn't grow ornamentals that they wanted. They were actually even concerned that from their grandkids coming out and seeing deer droppings, as we call them, or deer pellet groups in their backyard, thinking they're going to get Lyme disease. Yeah. So there's so much misinformation out there. But when I walked away pleasantly that night is, usually if I go in an urban area like that, 12 people are there, there's going to be more than half of them that are saying, why are you even allow somebody to hunt?
Yeah.
Why are you allowing somebody to trap in it? Why you folks are Neanderthals? You're killing the animals we want to see. This wasn't that. These people were educated enough that they want to have deer, but they felt they're at a point with too many. So the bottom line is, and we go to ever get more hunting opportunity in the city of Montpelier, and there's some pieces of land that probably hunters would love to hunt, but they're right now off limits. They're posted, and so they're going to have to work with the powers to be in the towns, the mayors and different people on city councils and things like that. And I think it's going to have to be a group decision by the community that, look, folks, we want to help the state manage deer. We want deer managed in our towns. So we're going to have to be in this together, because I'll tell you right now, the first time that Bay Area or Montpelier starts having more people bow hunting, the nature of killing a deer with a bow is it doesn't die instantly like a firearm.
Sure.
It bleeds out. So the bow hunter is going to shoot it. 9 times out of 10, it's going to show up on somebody else's property.
Yeah.
And the phone call the mayor is going to ring immediately.
Yeah.
So we don't want to go down that road until all of a sudden we've crossed those T's and dotted. We got their support, because they're going to have to handle those calls. Obviously, the wardens, and we're going to get them, but we're going to say, look, it's legal. But at the same time, people are going to have to welcome people on their land to do that, because that's their bit that they're contributing to wildlife management.
You've already had how many forms? How many more are coming? And when are we voting on this? Sometime this summer, right?
Yeah. So we've had 6 to date that dealt with this, as well as trying to get input on how many doe permits we should issue.
The public forums.
Public forums, official hearings. We've got 2 more. We got one coming up May 21st in Bethel at the old Whitcomb High School, now they call it an elementary school there. And then we got the other one at Champlain Valley Union in Heinsberg. That's coming up June 4th, 6:30 to 9. We welcome anybody to come, comment on these. We try to make sure we've got a lot of biological staff. We got members of the Fish and Wildlife Board there at these meetings to take input, because we work with them on the regulations. And we also have a few game wardens to come locally. So they're there to talk about issues in their town that come up. But, I got to tell you is we're a public agency. We work for everybody, as Mark alluded to earlier. So anybody at any time can send us an email. Find our website real easy, and we will make sure that any comment that we get, we look at it, and we'll forward it to the Fish and Wildlife Board. And I got to tell you, we've gotten about 1,000 already to date from these meetings and the emails that come in. But that's our job, and our job is to work for people in the state of Vermont, try to balance the different needs.
Who's fielding the comments coming into the Fish and Wildlife Department email box?
Well, fortunately, not me. So, and they're underpaid staff. I'll say that. But we get them all, and we collect them, and we have some of our staff actually try to put those in categories so the board can comprehend them. To do it. So it's a lot of work, but I got to say, that's what we got to do. And the more people comment, we're happy.
I make a little pitch here because what Mark is talking about here is managing these animals on the landscape for the benefit of everybody. But I'd also like to throw in something for to encourage the public to take ownership of this natural resource. Right? It is not just the people who buy hunting, fishing, and trapping licenses who have a say in what happens with the deer herd, or who have a say. I mean, collectively, these resources are owned by all of us. And from a law enforcement standpoint, to catch violators, when they take one of these animals not in accordance with the law or regulation, they are in effect stealing. They're stealing from you and you and my wife and our neighbor who doesn't hunt and the little old lady down the street, because they all collectively own this natural resource. And our ability to enforce the fish and wildlife laws and to keep those folks who intentionally steal this publicly held piece of property and make it their own private property, we cannot do our jobs unless people care, unless they care. Now, it is not a loss that you would feel as immediately as somebody breaking into your garage and stealing a chainsaw.
Sure.
But I guarantee you, if somebody did that, you would pick up the phone and call the police and say, I've been robbed, somebody stole. Well, when somebody shoots a deer at night or they take an animal not in accordance with law or regulation, they're stealing. They're doing the exact same thing, and you may not feel it like you feel somebody's taking your chainsaw, but you have been the victim here. So if the general public doesn't care about what happens to people breaking the hunting, fishing, and trapping laws, then I would encourage them to at least consider it on that level. These animals in part belong to you, and when somebody takes it, they're taking from you. So we are, as game wardens, from the law enforcement side, we are unable to do our jobs if people don't care.
Mark, you were spot on when you said this old boy was passionate.
Oh, I tell you, he's we're a credit to have these folks. They care. That's why
Pay him very
we're
well.
able to double their bonus every year.
I-
It's easy when it's zero.
Look for something extra in your paycheck. You may
That's right. A lot of
maybe able to
attaboys.
get
We got to
that-
give more out.
get that pack of gum I've had my eye on.
I want to know if so, how much social media, Mark, has helped you find deer shackers.
Well, it's a mixed blessing. Social media is killing us, I think, and it's killing us. He said, "I didn't expect this question."
It's a good one, though.
Look. I do make cases from folks who want to brag about whatever it is, and then people will send me, screenshots of somebody with their deer.
Sure.
And they'll say, yeah, I think this was taken on posted property or something. And it'll just point me in a direction. I'll know whose door to knock on to start asking questions. So, yes, it's been a help for us in a limited capacity to catch individual violators. But the social media phenomenon of posting these hero shots that are public for everybody to see, I think those of us who are inclined to do that sort of thing, you want to show the kid that maybe you took on youth hunting weekend posing with their deer, right? But if that's public, know that people who hunt, fish, and trap see that and they go, "Oh, what a great thing for that kid." But that's maybe 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
And the other 9 are thinking, I've just witnessed murder of Bambi.
Yes.
So it becomes, it like I said, it's a mixed blessing. It can help us catch individual violators, but the days of people posting 30 beaver carcasses, a trapper will successfully, take 30 beavers and they'll take a picture of it.
Sure.
And they may have shown that in the past to their trapper friends or other folks who are so inclined to appreciate photos like that. But there's a large chunk of the general public that sees that and is aghast.
Yeah. You mentioned to me before the cameras came hot that this coming turkey season was one you needed to give a big heads up on.
Well, it's all turkey seasons. The implements used to harvest turkey are close range, right? We're talking shotguns and bows and arrows in some cases. But turkey hunting for game wardens and for others who participate in turkey hunting is far and away our most dangerous season.
Why?
Well, if you think about the turkey their number one defense mechanism is their incredible eyesight. Right? So they don't have a great sense of smell. They're certainly not fast flyers or anything, but they protect themselves from predators by being able to spot danger. So people who pursue turkey tend to dress all in camouflage. They hunker down in the bushes, right? They try to be invisible and at the same time sound like a turkey. And sometimes they're putting, fake turkey right out in front of them, right? If I could get all turkey hunters to follow one rule, and that is do not road hunt. Just don't road hunt. If you drive around and see a turkey that you want to take, and you pull the truck off to the side of the road and you get out and you start stalking that turkey, you're now on a piece of property and you don't know. You don't know if somebody's hunkered down there in the bushes.
Sure.
And so we have, even though shotguns are only, lethal or damaging or can cause serious bodily injury at fairly close range. After you get out past 60 or 70 yards, the pellets are just going to bounce off someone. But the number one thing that we get are hunters who are trying to be invisible and other hunters who are pursuing turkey. And
I never would have thought of that. The
incidents of shot being mistaken for game are higher than they are during the deer seasons. Yep. Turkey hunting is just it's lethal. Don't gobble. When you're calling a turkey, you're just as likely to call in another turkey hunter to your location if you're sounding like a tom turkey.
Absolutely.
So use hen calls. If you set up in a way such that your back is against a tree that's wider than your body, or back against a rock that's wider than your body, because if you happen to call in another turkey hunter that's coming from behind and they see your elbow, they might think it's a fan and take a shot.
Wow.
All but one hunter-related shooting during turkey season that I've had in my whole career, all but one have involved road hunters. And doing exactly that, seeing a bird, stopping, getting out, trying to cut that bird off by skirting around to the far side of the field, and then blowing off a shot. It might even be directly at a bird, but you don't know what's beyond it or what's between you and the bird because you're new to that piece of property.
I see so much everywhere in the news these days, the concern of ticks and Lyme disease, and just this past weekend while it was pouring rain, if you go out in your yard, check yourself, even if your grass is short, you could be sitting on the porch and not even out in the brush, and you've got a tick on you. I mean, the tick situation seems to be particularly bad. It seems like it's almost been getting worse every year. How's that affecting moose and deer and bear?
Well, they all can get them. The moose tick actually is a different type of tick that seems to be affecting humans. That's the deer tick.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately, it's a state of reality right now, living in Vermont, here in New England, that when you go outdoors, you've got to tick-proof yourself. The days of just walking through the woods with shorts on, brushy areas is not advisable to anyone. Wear your tick-proof, probably even spray your pants. I mean, I never did this before, but the reality is it's a whole bunch of reasons why we seem to have, large number of ticks. It's due to the land, invasive species like honeysuckle, barberry. May even be some people thinking now that it's related to climate change with our weather patterns that we're having that's been conducive to ticks to be high numbers. High concentrations of deer is a factor, but it's probably more a factor is the white-footed mouse who carries the bacteria that affects people. So it's complex, but the bottom line is we want people to be outdoors. We want them to use. I mean, we're an outdoor state. Yeah. Whether you're a hunter, angler, or want to hike,
sure.
To ski or do whatever else. Luckily in the winter you don't have to worry about it. But if you own pets, most people own pets in this state. So the ticks could come off the pets to affect you. You got to treat your dogs. I mean, it's just a common factor to be aware of. So if you go outdoors right now, you got to do a common sense approach. Check yourself over when you come back. Take a shower.
Well, that's the point I wanted to
that.
make. Yeah. I make a bit of a move out of it when I come home and ask my wife to perform a thorough tick check.
How does that go?
It goes very, very well.
Does it?
It goes very well. But I guess the point here is the tick-borne illnesses. I mean, even if you find a tick, but it takes a while for the tick-borne illnesses to be transmitted from the tick to you.
Yeah.
On the off chance that tick is infected.
Yeah.
So even if you go out and enjoy the out of doors and you happen to get a tick on you, when you come in, you just be aware that you've been in a tick area, and then either do a thorough check yourself, or if you have a loved one or somebody that you might pay to do so, have them, and if you get it off quickly, then you're not in any danger.
Is it legal to do paid tick checks?
I don't know. Is that what the
is that
what the owner of the Patriots was doing?
I don't want to go there.
So.
Employees will be after me now for that.
Hey, there's been a great song written about that, Brad Paisley. But and your cats too. It's not just dogs. It's
you got to treat them all.
Indoor, outdoor cats.
No doubt about it. But it's scary. It's a little frightening, but it's here. What are you going to do about it? So we try to work with landowners to educate them on to try to remove invasive species when you're doing it there, and we're going to do our best to balance deer numbers, in the populations. Do that. Now, when it comes to moose, that's a whole different animal. It's not one that's going to be affecting humans, but definitely affects the moose. And there, we're finding out where we've got we're in the third year of a key study. We're radio calling. We got about, we're radio calling 30 to 60 moose every year. Follow them around, and we're finding out that the ticks are a factor. It's also a factor of our winters changing here in Vermont.
Of course.
It's all dependent on how long the snow and how frost up comes early. But we know it's having an impact on moose. But potentially, knock on wood, we've got our moose are staying at a sustained level of numbers right now in the Northeast Kingdom, where the heart of moose country is. And we're actually feeling maybe it's because of what we've done for management. Researchers are getting together in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, and they're pointing to Vermont saying that we've intentionally tried to maintain our moose densities at a lower number than other places, and that may be a factor. It's a host relationship. You got more moose in the landscape, you can have more moose ticks. So it's a balancing act of how many moose should we carry out on the landscape in order not to have a real epidemic of ticks wiping them off. And I think it's hard for people intuitively to understand that. But again, it comes back to hunters as being our real tool to help us figure, to keep control of the moose where we need to do it. Now, we're not at that point right now, but conceivably, if our moose survival is starting to show an uptick in numbers, we're going to be right back there trying to issue permits, asking hunters to go out there to follow the rules and regulations to control moose numbers.
I'm just a dumb old game warden here, but and not an expert at all in habitat. But I think the invasive plant species point cannot be overstated.
Good point.
We have species of underbrush that are not native to Vermont that provide an unnatural cover source for small rodents and animals. And
who the hell brought in the Japanese bamboo? Do we know who brought that into the state?
I don't know.
Can you get a name for me and find out?
Tell you what, why don't I look on Facebook?
My God, please.
You can put that out and you'll get an answer.
Maybe somebody will have posted a hero shot
somebody,
of them
there you go.
and their bamboo. But I always wondered how invasive plant species somehow affected the tick population or the spread of the disease. And I think it's because am I wrong about that?
It
harbors small warm-blooded animals.
It harbors them more, and it's something nature of the plant that seems to be more attractive to these ticks. And I got to tell you, we all seem to accept information from our own experiences and knowledge, but it was a hard one at first for me to swallow because all the early research pointed to deer numbers. Well, it's not. But, my own experience in South Barrie, I got to say, I love to go out at night and walk with my wife when I go home from work. We got 2 yellow labs. They're great. They stay right with us, and we do a little loop behind the house. I've never gotten a tick on me. I walk across a road that I know is both areas have deer that's loaded with barberry and honeysuckle, and we got ticks crawling all over us. I enjoy walking across the road more than the house, but that, you know what?
Wow.
This time of year, ticks are out there, folks. So be prepared.
What's the website for folks to learn more about the regulations?
Sure. VTFishandWildlife.com, all one word. So VTFishandWildlife.com. And they could go there and learn about anything, if they want about fish and wildlife. When we man, there'll be an easy number for them to click on and send us an email. Yeah. And you'd be amazed, people, with the different types of questions that we get. But that's where we want to be a service. Some of them we send out to the local wardens to deal with in their area. Others I send them to biologists or different staff people.
We want to say, if you have a legal question, by the way, on our website, the home telephone numbers of game wardens are published. So if you have a legal question and want to know, hey, if I do this, am I okay? Yeah. Before you head out into the field, you can contact your local game warden and get an answer.
Let's say boaters get prepared for the season. Make sure all of your equipment, you've done a thorough safety check. You're going to be out there patrolling the waters everywhere.
You already are.
And we've got free fishing day coming up, don't we?
Yes,
I don't know what the date is.
June.
It's the first Saturday in June.
First Saturday in June. How much does a fishing license cost?
When did I buy the combination license. So I don't know. We can
tell you right here. You got your glasses on. I don't. I got the law book. I figured that question would come up.
Okay.
That's hunting, actually. You know what? That's a curveball. I think the hunting license is $26.
Okay,
so I think it's the same. Hunting and fishing combination. You can go ahead and give them that.
For the combination license, which I would encourage you to get, 1 year is $42 for a resident, so you get both the fishing license and the hunting license.
Yeah.
Those folks who reach the age of 15. I get a lot of this during enforcement. People think it's 16 or 17 or 18.
That's true.
Once you reach at your 15th birthday, you now need a hunting license. Those folks who haven't yet reached the age of 15 can fish for free.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in here today. I could talk with both of you forever. This is fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for all that you do, both of you. I mean that sincerely. And best of luck to you with,
thanks for having us,
with everything going on.
Appreciate it.
Likewise.
All right.
Thanks, JD.
Thank you, Mark.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. Thanks to our sponsors. We're going to catch you next time around a little bit later on this week. We're going to be talking about dogs. We have a special dog trainer that's going to be coming in Friday night. Looking forward to it. That's going to do it for now. I'm JD Green on behalf of Central Vermont Television, Fontaine Forestry, and Millworks. This is Aired Out.